Episode number 5, getting set here for game number 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. The Toronto Raptors, the Milwaukee Bucks, and we have the crew call. The crew, Sherm, Jack, Eric, Jonesy, and my man Leo holding up the entire state of FLA. All right, guys, Raptors were down, Sherm, 2-0. They now lead the series 3-2, and they come back to close it out on their home floor. Lead us up to tip-off and your thoughts heading into Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, guys, personally, I thought after Game 5 that this series was over. I felt that coming back to Toronto that the Raptors had this series locked up. You could see Milwaukee. They just seemed deflated. They couldn't get it done at home. They watched the Raptors run 2 games off in a row, and they were concerned at that point. And coming back to Toronto, you knew that Toronto had to feel that they were the better team. Milwaukee knew they were the better team. And going to Toronto was just a process that had to happen because I felt that Milwaukee didn't feel they had a chance to win Game 6, and I thought the Raptors knew they were going to get the job done.
Well, what's the old line? Opportunities multiply as they're seized, they die as they're neglected. The Raptors seized the opportunity in Game 5 to take a stranglehold of the series, and now that you're home, you don't want to go back to Milwaukee for Game 7. I mean, as confident as you are winning on the road, at the same time, you got your win on the road. That was a signature win. Now it's time to close the deal. And I was impressed with how Milwaukee started, but more importantly, I was impressed with how Toronto just didn't buckle in any way, shape, or form. The crowd was sensational. They fed off of that, and they were just better and better as the game went on defensively of making sure Milwaukee didn't get into any sort of rhythm for the entire game. It was a really impressive home win and a way to literally put your foot on your opponent's neck and say, that's enough.
I think the resiliency is the theme that we've been talking about in all of these calls so far, the crew calls, and I think that was proven yet again in Game 6, to your point, Jacko. When you think about the early double-digit lead for Milwaukee, it shaved down to, I believe, 2. They build it right back up again to 13, to 15. Raptors punch back again at single digits by halftime. Milwaukee comes out in the third, build it up to 15. Raptors end up going on a massive run late third, early fourth to grab the lead and never look back from there. And again, I just think that speaks to the resiliency of this team. And I remember Kawhi Leonard saying after the ball game, when he started the fourth quarter on the bench, and he said, we just trusted one another. We had each other's back. We kept plugging away, and we just enjoyed the moment. So even in times where you're trailing for major chunks of the game and having to battle back from double-digit deficits, you're still enjoying the moment and trusting in what you've done over the course of the season, let alone the postseason, knowing that you're still going to be in a position to maybe win the game and ultimately, yes, win the game in the end.
Jonesy, when you think about the Raptors and Sherm and Jack and E have talked about this, we've all talked about this, how resilient they've been. Yeah. But they get down early and they come back. Bench was integral once again. It was, a 26-3 run, something like that. They really got the Raptors, Jonesy, going again.
Well, I looked at, that to me, that game, and there was a pattern, let's face it, in games 3, 4, 5, and 6. In every one of those games, Milwaukee came out more and more desperate at the start. And as Eric said, they lead by, 13, 15 in the first half. Raptors cut it down towards the end of the half. The same thing happens. But Milwaukee goes a stretch from late third with about 2 minutes to go to mid fourth, where they score 2 points over almost a 6.5 minute span. And that to me speaks to the resiliency of, look, and as Kawhi Leonard said, Eric just quoted him, enjoying the struggle. Like, this is part of it. That former coach Dwayne Casey used to say, hard things are hard. And this team kind of hung together. I just love the fact that Milwaukee, every time they thought, okay, we've righted the ship and we're okay, we've got our footing, here come the Raptors again. And I thought, and to Jack's point too about the crowd, I mean, I had a chance to look back at a snippet of the highlights of the game. The crowd was off the chart, providing energy for the Raptors. And Matt, they got big performances off the bench between Fred, Norm, and Serge.
Well, I think that's the whole thing when you're watching this Milwaukee Bucks team, that even when they made their runs, you could almost tell they're like looking over their shoulder because they know they can't get away from this Raps team. The Raps team is coming. And, you guys all mentioned the crowd was off the charts. I almost liked it better that they were playing from behind. And when they finally made that last surge, it was deafening inside Scotiabank Arena. And the crowd was just all over it. And the guys were just so locked in that, to me, that, Milwaukee had no chance in this game. No matter what they did, this game was over. This game was done. This Raptors team was not going to let it happen. Kawhi, Kyle, and I got to talk about Kyle a little bit. You know what? We talk about all these different guys stepping up and the performance of Kawhi, but Kyle is there every game. And it's typical that you don't talk about Kyle a lot because he is there every game. And it's all the little things he does. But I think sometimes we end up forgetting that, hey, there's been one constant over the last 6 years, and that's Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a game in which you look at a phenomenal player in Giannis Antetokounmpo, that here he is in his first ever Eastern Conference Finals. And I think probably stunned a little bit. And you look at the Raptors, and you had this sense, I think, throughout the Philly series and certainly in this Milwaukee series, a lot of guys have been there before, and they had this chip on their shoulder and a point to prove. Kyle, to your point, Leo, he's been in the Eastern Conference Finals. Marc Gasol's been to a Western Conference Finals. As we know, Kawhi and Danny have won rings and been there before. And Serge Ibaka, and what was just an unbelievable unit in Oklahoma City, went to the finals. And they thought, hey, we lose, okay, in 2012, but we'll be back, and never to get back. And so I remember thinking during this Game 6, Sherm, you look over there and you just say, there's so many storylines with these players. I think they can smell this, and they're not letting go. They're not letting go, to Jack's point about, seizing the opportunity. They're not letting go. And the big difference between those two teams maybe was just, maybe they're resilient because they've all been there before. I don't know if you kind of had that same sense.
Well, there's definitely the feel of the been there, done that from certain guys on the Raptors side. And we talk about leaders permeating the team, the personality or the disposition of your leaders. Well, Kawhi was a leader for that team, and he had been there. He had done that. He fought all those battles in the Western Conference. So he knew that the process wasn't going to be easy, but you had to, as everybody said, you had to enjoy the moment, enjoy the struggle to really enjoy winning. And I thought that was a great message that he sent. Also, we've talked about the Raptors and the way they closed the game out in that end of the third, fourth quarter. But about 3 minutes left in the second quarter, in the first quarter into the second quarter, the Raptors went on a run, and you touched on it, Matt. And it was one of those runs where you look at the final frame and you see what they did, but if they didn't make that run early in the game after Milwaukee jumps out with a big lead in the first quarter, maybe there's a bit of a wobbly feeling coming out after halftime, but they did a great job making a run. Fred VanVleet was huge, but I just think that understanding that this moment was vital, this game was important. There was no Game 7 in the Raptors' mind. It was only Game 6, and they were going to take care of business. And that comes from, as we talked about, guys who have been there, who have done that, and understand you don't use what you have in the bank. If you don't need it right now, you leave it for later.
Yeah. Jack, what was your sense there? I mean, you really touched upon it the first time, but with respect to seizing that opportunity. But what was pivotal when you look back at this game?
I'm going to use a college basketball analogy because I really think when you get into big games, you like having juniors and seniors. And Matt, you hit on a great point in terms of the number of Raptors that had experience. Let's not forget Norman Powell was in the Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, they've all grown up as Raptors playing in playoff games.
G League, too.
Yeah. I mean, so when you add it all up, these are guys that aren't fazed by the moment. that have grown. I always say this, and I think that's a big reason why the Raptors are so successful as an organization. Guys have had to earn their minutes. They've had to earn their stripes, and they've grown up in a winning environment. It's like playing at Duke or Carolina or Kentucky or whatever, where we don't see this as much anymore, where guys go from being underclassmen to upperclassmen and have to pay their dues, but they pay it within winning. And I look at the Raptors, they just had a group of guys that weren't gonna break. They had confidence, they had maturity, and they had the know-how that really makes a difference, particularly when you get down and you don't panic. And you guys made the point, and I think it's so right. I mean, there were a number of times that Milwaukee went on these big runs, and the Raptors didn't flinch at all, Leo.
No, absolutely. And the experience, and then you add in that one piece, right? The guy that's been there, the guy that's done it all, the guy that's been an MVP, the guy that's a champion. And he just seemed to pick the right moments to step up. And the one moment from that game, I think it was around 6 minutes to go in the game, when Kyle kind of blocked off the defender and dropped a little handoff to Kawhi Leonard for that resounding dunk over Giannis Antetokounmpo. And that was it. That was the exclamation point. The crowd went absolutely crazy. And even Kawhi Leonard, the guy that's seen it all and done it all, he just said it was unbelievable from that point. I love Kyle's line, let the big dog eat. And that's the whole thing. I mean, the big dog was eating, and he was eating well, and the Raptors all fed off of him, and I think Kyle, as I said before.
To all the points that we've made, the word experience comes to mind. And not just experience in having been there, experience around the timing too. You know, Jack always uses the line stage presence. And this team understood. You know, it's we talk about the college game, Jack. It's like in every NCAA tournament championship, you got to win 6 or 7 games. There's one game you can look back at and say, boy, if we didn't have it going in that game, or we didn't find a way to, get that one done. And I think this Raptors team understood this was a moment. And I always talk about a guy winning a major tournament in golf. There's one round where you don't have your best swing and you fight your way around the course. And for the Raptors, they realize this is game 6. Like, this is the one that we have to somehow survive. And if we get past this, then the road to the top might be paved a little bit better. And I think the experience came through huge, particularly late in that third quarter and early into the fourth. And then that's when the fans got on board too.
Well, I want to, Eric, kind of bring this to a point because we know the outcome of the game. And we've talked so much about the Raptors and how brilliant they've been in this run that they've had, and the entire country coming together. And to me, I really want to talk about, just from your point, is that Cooper over there, by the way?
That's Big Cooper right here.
Cooper.
That's a big
Coop,
dog
what's
right
up, brother? What's up
let
with
The
my
big
man,
dog
Coop?
eating, Leo?
Let the big dog eat.
That's
Is
the
the
big
big
dog
dog eating?
right here. That's the big dog, right?
Let the big
man.
dog eat.
Man.
But what was it? What did it mean for you, Eric? I said this at the end, and I remember looking at Leo at the end of the game, who's been with the team since 1995, grew up in Toronto, the kid from Kiel, one of the great Canadian basketball players of all time. Sherm, you've represented your country. Jonesy, you played the game and coached the game. And Jack, you've played and coached. And you and I played Nerf ball back in the day. But I said, 24 seasons in the making, the Toronto Raptors are headed to their first ever NBA Finals. And I looked at Leo, and you could tell there was some emotion there, and understandably so. There's emotion in all of us, I think, that night. For you, what did that mean?
I mean, it was huge. I mean, I think back to I started as an intern on the radio side in season 2, and by season 4, I was full time doing pre-aff and post with Jacko and Chuck Swirsky on the radio for 7 years before Jonesy and I ultimately have taken over on the radio side for the last 15. But in year 1 that the Raptors came into existence, I was one of those dudes in the stands. I sat out in right field for the Jordan game against the Raptors when the Bulls came to town. I was in the stands for the expansion draft, and I was booing the Damon Stoudemire pick, chanting for Ed O'Bannon, ultimately like an idiot like everybody else. And so for me to go from being a fan and growing up with the Showtime Lakers and just being this weird Canadian that, as much as I liked hockey, I grew up on baseball and basketball more than anything. And I always got sideways looks from friends and whatnot as a kid. Like, why are you into basketball so much? You don't even have a team. There's no team in Canada. To see that come full circle, selfishly to see my career for 20 plus years now, but to be in that moment and to be on the floor interviewing a player right at the end of it, to be 2 feet away from the celebration and seeing that trophy and knowing that the team that you cover and that you've invested your life into is now going to the NBA Finals, it was massive. And not to sound cheesy about it, but to share that moment with all of you guys as well, because as you just laid out, Matt, you've been here for over a decade now. Jack and I came in together. Leo and Jonesy, original OGs. Me and Sherm going back almost 20 plus years now on the NBA TV side and the radio side. We've all been in this together for a long time. So it was a special moment, I think, for all of us, not just for the players.
Matty, at one point on the floor, you and Leo were doing your thing, and it kind of ended, and I walked over, and Leo and I just looked at each other. Like, we didn't say anything. We just looked at each other, and I turned my head sideways, and Leo shook his head. And to me, that was 21-61 in the first year, Leo. That was Darrell Walker leaving the team and everybody jumping ship. It was Glenn Grunwald getting booed at Maple Leaf Gardens and saying this will never happen again. And that was 22-60 the year Dwayne Casey took over, before Dwayne Casey took over. And all of this now, like you see this stuff your whole life, the celebrations, and there you are standing in the middle of it. And I mean, to look at the journey and all of the people that are in it, and especially, being able to share it with you guys. It's not the final destination. It's who you share the journey with.
Leo, I know looking over at you, you can't help but get emotional, and I think both of us were kind of like, all right, let's take, right. You're trying to be a pro, and you're like, okay, right. Let's allow the crowd and everything to play out. But for you, as somebody that grew up playing the game here in Toronto, I had a brilliant career at St. Mike's and then on to Syracuse, and represented your country at the age of 16. To see all this happen, the range of emotions must have just been nearly overwhelming to you.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. Like all the things Jonesy said, just from within the Raptors organization, hanging out with you guys. But then you go back and think of basketball where it was. I mean, we were the oddballs, right? We were the oddballs playing ball. And, there were pockets of basketball people in Toronto and across Canada. And we all had to go, everybody had to go get their fill somewhere else, right? You had to go to Detroit to watch the Pistons. You had to go to Syracuse to watch the Orange. You had to, any place close. I mean, Winnipeg people are going to Minnesota. Everybody's going somewhere to watch the game of basketball. And all of a sudden, you realize that we're going to the pinnacle, right? We're going to the top. And to me, the NBA coming to Canada in 95 was so huge. I mean, that really changed everything, right? And now you're going to the NBA Finals. And, I'm sure we're gonna talk about this as we go forward, but we don't even know the impact yet. I mean, this is the NBA coming to Canada 2-0. And, you're feeling all that. And if I might add, and a guy everybody here knew well too, John Saunders did the first five years of the Raptors together, and I tell you, I thought of John right away too, because John was he bled the Raptors, and so I just wish he could have been there in that moment too to share with the rest of us. But unfortunately, that's life. But a lot of emotions for sure.
Sherm, as somebody that played at VCU, grew up here, represented your country, and wow, Raptors are actually headed to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And, Eric touched on the fact that hockey is so big in our country, and it's a beautiful sport. And it's a sport that I wanted to play when I was younger, but I quickly learned that it wasn't designed for me. And I I found basketball. And to me, you know, basketball became everything in terms of what I did with all my free time as a kid, you know, hanging around the courts, waiting for the older guys to give me a chance to play, you know, and you finally make your way in the game. And to everyone's point, listen, basketball has been big for a long time. It didn't just happen when the Raptors got here, but we didn't have any credible way of putting it out there to people, and nobody would buy into it. Now we had the Raptors winning the Eastern Conference Finals, heading to the finals. And in that moment, all of those things came into play for me. The emotion behind it was almost tearful, just to see this sport and see our country embrace this sport that we've all loved all of our lives. So it was a real emotional moment, and that was even accentuated more to see the Raptors win a championship.
And Jack, and Sherm brings up, it wasn't just about the Raptors, right? It's about the growth of the game, and you've been here through 22 seasons of it, and you grew up in the mecca of basketball in New York. But to see what all of a sudden this Raptor run and now headed to the finals is truly remarkable and special.
Well, two things. When I came to the area in 1988 at Niagara and recruiting in Toronto and recruiting in Canada, you always felt, man, if something ever happened here, there's so much talent here. And then I'll never forget 1994, when 93, 94, if I'm not mistaken, when it was announced that Toronto and Vancouver were going to get NBA teams. I remember as a coach at Niagara sitting with my assistant coaches saying, that's the next frontier. That's where it's all going to happen. There's going to be amazing talent coming out of there because it's a melting pot. And then years later, being with the Raptors and going through some really lousy years, I've always said this is the most underperforming franchise in the NBA because it has the most potential. It's a sleeping giant. And on that day, thinking about all that, you say to yourself, the giant has awoken. And we all can reflect now on what took place in the NBA Finals and the viewing parties and the enthusiasm across the country. Even the enthusiasm now during difficult times where people are tuning in and watching replays. To me, it just blows me away about the potential of this sport long term.
It was a special run, and there's no question Raptors are headed to their first ever NBA Finals. And we want to thank special people, everybody out on the front lines, everybody working hard at all the hospitals everywhere, inclusive of our local grocery stores, and everyone doing what they need to do by staying safe, staying inside, washing your hands, social distancing. Thank you. It's because of you that we're able to remain safe. And so keep it up, keep doing it. And thank you so much, guys. Big thanks to everybody out there, and enjoy the Raptors. 24 seasons in the making are headed to their first ever NBA Finals.